China just passed a law that makes it illegal for an EV battery to catch fire or explode. Not eventually. Not with a warning first, ever. That's the biggest EV story of the year. It's not. Because while regulators were writing that law, China's own EV market was quietly ripping itself apart. More new models hitting showrooms right now than the entire United States sells. Total. And fewer buyers than last year. One country, two explosions. And neither one is staying inside China's borders. For 20 years, the entire electric car industry has operated on one quiet assumption. If a battery gets damaged badly enough, eventually it might catch fire, and the best you can do is warn the driver 5 minutes before it happens. On July 1st, 2026, China tore that assumption out by the roots with a law demanding batteries simply never catch fire at all, crash or no crash, ever. And that is only half the story. While that law was taking effect, the Chinese EV market was ripping itself apart from the inside. 156 brand-new electric vehicle models are hitting Chinese showrooms in the second half of this year alone. For comparison, the entire United States doesn't have 156 EV models total. From every brand combined, gas or electric doesn't matter, we don't get anywhere close to that number of choices. And at the exact same time this flood of new metal is hitting the market, Chinese EV sales at home are actually falling, down 13% in the first half of the year. So you've got more cars than ever, chasing fewer buyers than last year. Under a safety law, almost nobody can fully meet yet. That is not a market growing. That is a market blowing up, in both directions at once. One side of this story is a genuine engineering breakthrough that's going to make every EV on the planet safer, whether you ever buy a Chinese car or not. The other side is a bloodbath, dozens of companies fighting for survival, and most of them are going to lose. Today, we're breaking down the law, the flood, the fallout, and exactly what all of this means for you, the American car buyer, even if you'll never legally own a car from most of these brands. To understand why this new Chinese battery law is such a massive deal, you need to understand what came before it. Back in 2020, China introduced its first serious national EV battery safety standard, known as GB 38031-2020. That rule said if a battery is damaged in a crash and starts heading toward a fire, the car has to warn the driver at least 5 minutes before that fire happens. 5 minutes to pull over, get out, and get away. That was considered cutting edge at the time. It's still roughly where most of the world sits today, including plenty of cars sold right here in America. 5 minutes is a warning system. It is not a fix. It assumes the fire is coming and just tries to buy you time to escape it before it does. The new standard, called GB 38031-2025, throws that entire mindset out the window. It doesn't ask for a warning anymore. It demands that the fire simply doesn't happen at all. Even after what's called thermal runaway, which is basically a chain reaction inside a damaged battery cell where heat builds so fast it can ignite the entire pack, the battery is now required to just not catch fire and not explode, for hours, not minutes. Some of the more detailed reporting on this standard puts the containment window at a full 2 hours after a single cell starts to go into thermal runaway. 2 hours where a battery is required to sit there, overheating internally, and still refuse to combust. On top of that, a companion regulation covering the whole vehicle, GB 18384-2025, now requires cars to include a physical mechanical power cutoff switch, so a first responder pulling someone out of a wreck can manually kill the high-voltage system with one motion instead of hoping the software handles it correctly in the chaos of an accident scene. There's also a brand new underbody impact test, where engineers literally drag the car over a fixed steel obstacle at speed to simulate hitting road debris or a curb hard enough to punch into the battery pack from underneath. And there's a new fast charge durability requirement too, aimed squarely at cells that charge from 20 to 80% in 15 minutes or less, which tells you China isn't just thinking about safety in isolation. They're thinking about safety at the exact charging speeds the whole industry is racing toward. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. Some companies already met this standard years before it became law. KTL, the biggest battery maker on Earth by a wide margin, says its no thermal propagation technology has been in mass production since 2020, 6 full years ahead of the deadline. BYD says its second-generation blade battery already clears the new bar with room to spare and has the crash test data to back it up. Even a smaller player like Eve Energy claims both its LFP and ternary battery chemistries hit the no-fire, no-explosion target back in 2022. That tells you something important. This wasn't a law written to punish the industry from the outside. It was a law written by regulators watching what the best players in the industry had already quietly figured out how to do on their own, and then telling everyone else, catch up or get out of the business entirely. And that catch up or get out part is not a figure of speech. Meeting this new standard is expected to raise battery system costs by 15 to 20%, which industry estimates put at somewhere between $440 and over $700 added straight onto the cost of every single battery pack. For a company like BYD or CATL operating at massive scale with years of head start, that's an annoyance they can absorb and barely notice. For a smaller battery maker with thin margins, limited engineering resources, and no real production scale, that's the kind of cost increase that can sink a company entirely, almost overnight. Which brings us to the second part of this story, because the flood of competition hitting this market right now was already brutal before this law even landed on top of it. While that safety law was being finalized behind the scenes, Chinese automakers were doing something almost nobody in America has fully clocked yet. In the second half of 2026 alone, roughly 156 new electric vehicle models are launching in China. Sit with that number for a second. The entire American new car market, gas, hybrid, and electric, every brand, every segment combined, doesn't offer anywhere close to 156 EV choices. China is about to drop that many brand new electric models in 6 months. Sedans, crossovers, pickup trucks, tiny city cars barely bigger than a golf cart, 7-seat family haulers, full-blown off-road SUVs, all of it, all at once, from dozens of different brands most Americans have never even heard of. Names like Zeekr, Xpeng, Leapmotor, Geely's Galaxy lineup, Denza, Onvo, NIO's more affordable sub-brand, and of course, BYD itself, which just pushed into the full-size electric SUV space with a brand new flagship called the Datang, built around a premium chassis and suspension setup meant to compete directly with luxury players. Some of these launches are getting genuinely creative to stand out. Zeekr, for example, has started skipping the typical high-production reveal events other brands use, betting that the product itself does the talking instead of the show around it. When you're one of 156 new models fighting for attention in the same 6-month window, you have to find some way to cut through the noise, and every brand is trying a different angle. This isn't just a story about variety for the sake of variety. It's a story about a market that has become an absolute pressure cooker. Every one of these companies is fighting for the same shrinking pool of buyers in a country where, remember, overall EV and plug-in hybrid sales are actually falling right now, not growing. That combination, more products than ever chasing fewer buyers than last year, is exactly the kind of environment that separates the companies built to last from the companies that were only ever built to raise venture money and burn through it fast. And in China right now, that separation is happening in real time, out in the open, for anyone paying attention to watch. Here's a stat that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. Out of the huge crowd of Chinese EV brands you may have heard of, only 3 of them are actually profitable right now. 3. BYD, Xiaomi, and Leapmotor. That's it. Everyone else, and we're talking about dozens of well-funded, well-known automakers with household name recognition inside China, is currently losing money on every single car they sell. Industry analysts at Alex Partners estimate that maybe 4 more of these companies could reach break-even by the year 2030. 4 over the next 4 years, out of dozens currently in the fight. The rest are expected to either get acquired by a bigger rival looking to absorb their market share or simply collapse outright. Think about what that actually means. This is the country that built the largest EV market on the planet, the country every legacy automaker on Earth is genuinely terrified of, and even there, being an EV company right now mostly means losing money while you fight for basic survival. Industry insiders are already describing this moment as a shift away from pure growth and toward what they're calling structural upgrading, meaning the era of every new EV startup automatically finding buyers is over, and what's left is a much harsher fight over who actually deserves to survive. Add in China's shrinking government support for new energy vehicles and a small annual tax break for EV buyers that's being phased out starting in January of 2027. And you start to see why local sales are sliding even as the number of new models exploded around them. It is genuinely a war of attrition. New models keep coming out because companies need something new sitting on the showroom floor to survive another quarter, not necessarily because the market has real room for all of them. Battery demand growth itself is telling the same story. Overall, battery installation growth in China is expected to slow sharply this year compared to last, even while a completely different corner of the market, commercial electric vehicles like vans, buses, and trucks, is actually accelerating hard. That kind of divergence, passenger EVs slowing down while commercial EVs speed up, is exactly what a maturing, consolidating market looks like from the inside. This is the part of the story where China's EV boom stops looking like an unstoppable rocket ship and starts looking like what one Bloomberg columnist recently described as a fragmented market with far too many players chasing far too few winners. A government that helped build these companies up through years of subsidies and support now has to sit back and watch a huge chunk of them get wiped out by the very competition it encouraged in the first place. That is a strange, almost uncomfortable position for Beijing to be in, and it's happening whether they want it to or not. So if the home market is this brutal, where's the money supposed to come from? The answer is the rest of the world, and this is exactly where the story stops being just China's problem and starts becoming everyone else's problem too. Analysts believe Chinese automakers could end 2026 having exported roughly 10 million vehicles combined. 10 million cars leaving Chinese factories bound for other countries in a single year. That's a jump of about 41% compared to the year before. When you can't make money selling at home, you go find buyers somewhere else, and that is exactly what's happening right now, at a scale most American car shoppers have absolutely no idea is even occurring. BYD is leading that overseas charge harder than almost anyone. They're currently building out a network of fast charging stations across Europe, with plans for around 3,000 of these stations. So European buyers get the same rapid charging experience BYD has been perfecting back home for years. That's not a small side project or a marketing gimmick. That is a company pouring real capital into physical charging infrastructure on another continent because it genuinely believes overseas buyers are where its next chapter of growth actually lives, not at home. BYD has also been restructuring how its overseas brand operations work entirely, betting on tighter integration between its sales channels and this new flash charging network, essentially trying to recreate the ecosystem advantage it built in China, brick by brick, on foreign soil. Volkswagen, meanwhile, the single biggest automaker in Europe and a company with over a century of history, is dealing with a genuine crisis. Multiple factory closures, tens of thousands of job cuts, and a strategy that's had to be rewritten multiple times in just the last couple of years, partly because Chinese competition is eating into a market VW used to consider safely, permanently its own. And it's not just Volkswagen feeling it. Automakers across the price spectrum, from mainstream family brands all the way up through some luxury nameplates, are quietly re-evaluating their China strategies and their European pricing because the ground underneath them has genuinely shifted. This is the double meaning behind the phrase, China blows up the entire EV market. At home, the market is genuinely exploding under the pressure of too many players, a punishing new safety law, and shrinking demand, all hitting at the exact same time. Companies are getting blown apart by their own competition, quarter after quarter. But at the exact same moment, China's strongest players are using that exact same pressure as rocket fuel to blow open brand new markets overseas, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, across Latin America, and beyond. One country, one industry, imploding internally and exploding outward globally at the very same time. If this kind of deep dive into what's actually happening behind the headlines in the global car industry is your thing, do me a favor and drop a like on this video right now. It genuinely helps this channel keep making these breakdowns. Drop a comment too. I read every single one, and I want to know what you honestly think about all this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and tap that notification bell, because we cover stories exactly like this one on a regular basis, and you do not want to miss the next one. Now here's the question you're probably actually asking yourself right now. None of these cars are legally sold in the United States, so why should an American car buyer care about any of this at all? Because the pressure from this shakeout does not stay neatly contained inside China's borders, and honestly, it never has. Start with safety. China's new no-fire, no-explosion battery standard is, right now, the toughest EV battery law anywhere on Earth, full stop. When the world's largest EV market sets a bar that high, global suppliers and battery makers do not go build one safer version of their technology just for China and a lesser, cheaper version for everyone else. They build to the new, tougher standard once and then sell that same improved technology worldwide, because running two completely separate production lines is simply more expensive than just building everything to the higher bar. Batteries getting genuinely, provably safer in China puts real pressure on every automaker selling batteries anywhere in the world, including the ones sitting in your own driveway right now. Then there's price. Every single time a wave of Chinese EV makers gets desperate enough for buyers, whether that desperation is playing out inside China or as these brands push harder into Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, it puts real downward pressure on EV prices globally, not just locally. American automakers and Tesla have already been cutting prices for years, partly because they know exactly what's coming down the road if they don't stay genuinely competitive on cost. A shakeout this severe happening in China right now, combined with exports surging 41% just to make up for a shrinking home market, means that global pricing pressure isn't going away anytime soon, if you've been waiting for EV prices in America to come down further before making the switch. The brutal, almost merciless competition happening in China right now is one of the biggest reasons that's still a genuinely realistic bet to make. And finally, there's the tariff wall itself. Right now, roughly a 100% tariff sits between Chinese-built EVs and the American market, a wall that was built specifically to keep this exact flood of competition out of American driveways. But BYD has already shown, through factories in Hungary and Mexico built specifically to sidestep tariffs elsewhere, that a wall built around where a car is designed doesn't necessarily stop where that car actually gets built. As Chinese brands push harder overseas to survive this brutal shakeout at home, expect a lot more of that kind of maneuvering. More local assembly plants strategically placed just outside tariff zones, more joint ventures and partnerships with companies already inside those markets, and more quiet ways to get the technology, if not always the actual badge, closer and closer to American roads over time. So let's go back to exactly where we started. A law that says an EV battery simply is not allowed to catch fire anymore. Full stop, no exceptions. 156 new models flooding a market that is actually shrinking underneath them. Only 3 profitable companies standing out of dozens still in the fight. 10 million cars getting shipped overseas because the home market simply cannot absorb what's being built. That is not one story happening on its own. That is the exact same event happening from 2 completely different angles at the exact same time. China is not just building better cars. China is running the most ruthless natural selection experiment the global auto industry has ever seen, in full public view, in real time, right now, while you watch it happen. And the survivors of that experiment, the handful of companies tough enough and well-run enough to make it through this shakeout, are the ones who are going to define what an electric car actually costs, how genuinely safe it is, and how fast it charges for the entire rest of this decade. Whether that particular car ever wears a badge you personally recognize or not, the ripple effects from all of this are already crossing the ocean and hitting your side of the world. The market didn't just grow this year, it blew up violently from the inside and the outside at once, and what's left standing once the dust finally settles is going to be stronger, cheaper, and genuinely safer than anything that came before it. And that's the real story of how China just rewrote the entire rulebook on EV safety, while its own domestic market tears itself apart underneath that very same announcement. If you learned something new today, that is exactly why we make these videos in the first place. This channel exists because we love breaking down the real engineering and business stories behind the cars that are actually shaping what ends up on the road, both here in America and everywhere else. No fluff, no brand loyalty, just wherever the actual story genuinely leads us. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell right now so you catch the next one the moment it drops, because we've got a lot more stories like this one lined up that you genuinely will not want to miss. And I want to hear directly from you down in the comments on this one. If Chinese automakers keep pushing this hard on safety and on price, do you think the tariff wall around the American market actually holds for another 5 years? Or does it eventually crack under all that pressure? Drop your honest take down below. I read every single comment on these videos, and some of the very best conversations on this whole channel happen right there in that comment section. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the very next one.